There are worlds in the Imperium where faith burns so bright it consumes everything else, leaving only the charred skeleton of devotion where human society once stood. Vox transmissions from the outer rim of Segmentum Obscurus carry whispered reports of a world where the distinction between worship and madness has been erased so thoroughly that even the ecclesiarchy's most hardened missionaries speak of it in hushed tones. They call it Penitentia Maxima, though its original name has been scoured from all but the most ancient records. Here, in the shadow of a dying star, 11 billion souls exist in a state of perpetual genuflection, their lives structured around a single, overwhelming imperative: to prove their worthiness through suffering. The planet's surface tells the story of a civilization that has turned inward upon itself with surgical precision. Great spires of blackened stone rise from valleys carved into prayer wheels, their surfaces etched with litanies so dense that the very architecture seems to whisper. Between these monuments, hab blocks stretch in perfect geometric patterns, each one positioned to face the cardinal sanctum at the world's heart. From orbit, the settlements resemble the spokes of a vast wheel, all pointing toward that central axis of faith where something unspeakable waits in perpetual judgment. 23 hours of every day belong to the Emperor. The 24th belongs to survival. This division is not metaphorical. It is enforced by the chronarch priests, a caste of tech-augmented clergy who have replaced their eyes with chronometers and their hearts with purity seals. They move through the settlements like clockwork angels, their mechanical hymns marking each minute of devotion, each second of permitted rest. To be caught in any activity not explicitly sanctioned during the holy hours is to invite correction. To be corrected twice is to be marked for penitence. To be marked for penitence is to begin the long walk toward the cardinal sanctum, where absolution takes forms that the human mind was never meant to comprehend. The children of Penitentia Maxima learn to pray before they learn to speak. In the nursery chapels, infants are suspended in cradles carved from bone, their tiny hands guided into the sign of the Aquila before their motor functions have fully developed. The lullabies sung to them are not songs of comfort but catalogues of heretical thoughts, each verse ending with the punishment such thoughts deserve. By the age of 3, these children can recite the litany of sins from memory. By 5, they understand that love of family must never exceed love of the Emperor. By 7, they are ready to make their first denunciation. The denunciation protocols are perhaps the most insidious achievement of Penitentia Maxima's theocratic system. Every citizen is required to submit weekly reports on the spiritual health of their neighbors, their co-workers, their family members. These reports are not mere formalities but sacred documents, reviewed by the purity assessors with the same fervor that other worlds reserve for strategic military intelligence. A father who notices his daughter's prayers lasting 30 seconds less than the prescribed duration is expected to report this deviation. A mother who observes her son's concentration wavering during the evening benedictions must document this lapse in excruciating detail. The forms themselves are works of bureaucratic artistry, their margins illuminated with scenes of saints in ecstasy and sinners in agony. Each question is designed to probe deeper into the spiritual condition of the subject, to reveal the hairline fractures in faith that might, if left untreated, spread into full apostasy. Did the subject maintain proper posture during the hour of crimson contemplation? Were their responses to the call of devotion sufficiently fervent? Did they exhibit any signs of doubt, curiosity, or worst of all, independent thought? Those who fail to submit their denunciations face immediate questioning. Those who submit insufficient denunciations face extended questioning. Those who submit false denunciations face a fate that makes questioning seem merciful by comparison. But those who submit thorough, detailed, accurate denunciations are rewarded with continued existence and the profound satisfaction of serving the Emperor's will. In this way, the system feeds upon itself, each act of betrayal strengthening the bonds that hold the population in spiritual servitude. The architecture of Penitentia Maxima reflects this paranoid devotion in ways both subtle and overwhelming. The hab blocks are constructed without doors between family units, the walls thin enough that every whispered prayer can be heard by neighbors trained from birth to listen for signs of insufficient piety. The communal spaces are designed as amphitheaters of observation, where citizens gather not for fellowship but for collective surveillance disguised as worship. Every surface that might accommodate decoration bears instead some reminder of the emperor's watchful presence. Carved eyes that seem to track movement, sculpted hands raised in blessing or condemnation, faces frozen in expressions of rapture or torment. The streets themselves follow the sacred geometries laid down by Saint Drusilla the Penitent, whose martyrdom established the theological foundations upon which Penitentia Maxima was built. These pathways spiral inward like the chambers of a shell, each turn bringing the walker closer to the cardinal sanctum while simultaneously disorienting them, creating a sense of sacred vertigo that the planet's rulers claim brings pilgrims closer to the emperor's divine perspective. Walking these streets becomes an act of worship in itself, each step a prayer, each breath a benediction offered up to the golden throne that sits distant among the stars. But it is in the industrial sectors that the true genius of Penitentia Maxima's system reveals itself. Here, during that single precious hour when citizens are permitted to engage in productive labor, the factories hum with activity that borders on the maniacal. Every tool has been blessed, every machine consecrated, every production quota calculated not by efficiency experts, but by numerologist priests who divine sacred significance in output statistics. The workers move with the frantic energy of those who know that their hour of permitted productivity must justify 23 hours of prayer, that their contribution to the planetary tithe must be sufficient to purchase another day of existence in the Emperor's grace. The products of this labor are themselves acts of devotion. Penitentia Maxima is renowned throughout the sector for the quality of its prayer beads, its devotional candles, its ceremonial incense. These items carry with them something that factory worlds and forge worlds cannot replicate, the desperate spiritual intensity of a population that has staked everything on their faith. A prayer bead carved on Penitentia Maxima is said to burn with cold fire in the hands of the truly devout. A candle made from the rendered fat of penitent sinners will burn for days without diminishing. Incense ground from the bones of martyrs carries prayers directly to the Emperor's throne, or so the planet's merchants claim. These claims are not entirely without foundation. The ecclesiarchy maintains purchasing contracts with Penitentia Maxima that date back millennia, valuing not just the craftsmanship of the world's devotional goods, but their spiritual authenticity. A shrine world that prays 23 hours a day produces artifacts that resonate with genuine faith, and genuine faith is a commodity more precious than adamantium in the darkness of the 41st millennium. The single hour of productivity takes on an almost sacred character in the lives of Penitentia Maxima's citizens. For 60 minutes they are permitted to think of something other than their sins, their prayers, their desperate need for absolution. For 60 minutes, they can lose themselves in the rhythm of work, in the satisfaction of creation, in the simple human pleasure of accomplishment. It is, perhaps, the closest thing to happiness that exists on their world. But even this hour is structured by the demands of faith. The workshops are filled with the sound of hymns, their melodies timed to match the optimal rhythms of production. The overseers who monitor the work are ordained priests, their litanies of encouragement indistinguishable from benedictions. The tools themselves bear sacred inscriptions, blessed oils that must be reapplied daily, ritual purifications that must be performed before and after each use. Even in their hour of permitted humanity, the citizens of Penitentia Maxima cannot escape the overwhelming presence of their devotion. When the hour ends, marked by the tolling of bells that echo across the entire planet's surface, the transformation is immediate and absolute. Tools are set aside with the reverence normally reserved for relics. Workbenches become altars, production floors become chapels, the workers drop to their knees in perfect unison, their bodies already moving into the familiar positions of prayer, even as their minds struggle to transition from the brief freedom of labor back to the eternal vigilance of worship. It is in these moments of transition that the true cost of Penitentia Maxima's system becomes visible. in the faces of workers who must tear themselves away from meaningful activity to return to the grinding repetition of enforced devotion, there flickers something that the planet's rulers would classify as dangerous doubt. In the hesitation before knees touch stone, in the barely perceptible sigh that escapes before the ritual responses begin, in the eyes that linger for just an instant too long on the tools they must abandon, the human spirit asserts itself against the machinery of absolute faith. These moments are watched for, catalogued, reported. The purity assessors have developed instruments sensitive enough to detect the bioelectric signatures of reluctance, microscopes powerful enough to reveal the cellular stress patterns that accompany suppressed rebellion. They know that the transition from productivity to prayer is the most dangerous time in the daily cycle, when the human need for purpose conflicts most directly with the imposed structure of devotion. Special prayers have been developed for these moments, rapid-fire litanies designed to overwhelm any thoughts that might arise in the gap between activity and worship. But the prayers cannot eliminate the gap entirely. For a few seconds each day, 11 billion souls experience something that approaches normal human consciousness, and in those seconds, the true horror of their situation becomes briefly visible even to themselves. They remember, dimly, that there was once a time when work was more than an hour, when prayer was a choice rather than a compulsion, when families were bound by love rather than mutual surveillance. The memory lasts only long enough to be classified as heretical thought, only long enough to require confession, correction, and renewed dedication to the Emperor's will. The confession booths of Penitentia Maxima are marvels of psychological engineering, designed not merely to receive admissions of guilt, but to intensify and purify them. Each booth is carved from a single block of obsidian, its interior surfaces polished to mirror brightness, so that penitents must confront their own reflection while admitting their sins. The acoustics have been calculated to amplify whispers into thunderous accusations, so that even the smallest admission of doubt becomes an overwhelming condemnation. The temperature within each booth is maintained at precisely the level required to induce mild discomfort without causing actual harm, a reminder that suffering is the price of absolution. The confessor priests who staff these booths are chosen for their ability to hear not just what is said but what is left unsaid, to detect the emotional resonances that indicate deeper spiritual corruption. They have trained their ears to recognize the subtle variations in breath pattern that accompany different categories of sin, the micro-tremors in voice that reveal the presence of heretical thoughts not yet spoken aloud. Their responses are not conversations but surgical procedures, designed to excise doubt with the precision of a chirurgeon and the fervor of an exorcist. Each confession is recorded, transcribed, analyzed, and filed in the vast archives beneath the cardinal sanctum. These records form a detailed psychological map of the entire population, tracking the spiritual health of every citizen from birth to death. Patterns of doubt are identified and addressed before they can spread. Families showing signs of insufficient devotion are separated and reassigned to different districts. Individuals whose confessions reveal dangerous tendencies are marked for closer observation, their daily routines monitored by specialists trained to recognize the early warning signs of apostasy. The analysis of these confessions has become a science unto itself, practiced by scholar priests who spend their lives studying the mathematics of sin. They have identified 17 distinct categories of spiritual deviation, each with its own therapeutic regimen. They have mapped the emotional territories where doubt takes root, charted the psychological vectors along which heretical thoughts spread. Their work has refined the planet's spiritual discipline to a level of precision that would be admirable if it were not so utterly horrifying. But perhaps most disturbing of all is the fact that the system works. Penitentia Maxima has not experienced a single act of rebellion in over 3,000 years. Its population displays levels of faith that exceed even those found on Ophelia VII or Macragh. Its tithe contributions are submitted early and exceed quotas with regularity that suggests divine favor. By every metric that the Imperium uses to measure the spiritual health of its worlds, Penitentia Maxima is a shining example of what human devotion can achieve when properly directed and maintained. The Adeptus Ministorum holds up the world as a model for other shrine worlds to emulate. Delegations of ecclesiarchs visit regularly to study its methods and export its techniques. The Cardinal Sanctum has been declared a site of pilgrimage, drawing the faithful from across the sector to witness true devotion in action. These pilgrims return to their home worlds carrying tales of a place where faith has achieved perfect expression, where every soul burns with love for the Emperor, where the very air seems charged with divine presence. They are not wrong about the divine presence. Something dwells in the Cardinal Sanctum that defies easy categorization, something that has fed for millennia on the concentrated devotion of 11 billion souls. Whether this presence is truly divine, or merely something that has learned to wear divinity like a mask, is a question that the Inquisition has debated in closed chambers for centuries. What is certain is that it responds to the prayers offered to it, that it grants boons to those who demonstrate sufficient faith, that it punishes those who fall short of its expectations with a creativity that suggests either infinite mercy or infinite cruelty. The pilgrims who enter the Cardinal Sanctum speak of visions that transform their understanding of faith, of communion with something so vast and ancient that their minds struggle to contain the experience. They emerge changed, their eyes bright with tears of joy or terror, their voices thick with awe. Many never speak of what they witnessed in that inner sanctum. Others cannot stop speaking of it, their words pouring out in torrents of ecstatic description that border on glossolalia. A few never emerge at all, choosing to remain in the presence of whatever dwells there, adding their voices to the eternal choir that echoes through the sanctum's depths. This choir is perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the Cardinal Sanctum, a sound that penetrates the very bedrock of the planet and emerges in whispers from drainage grates and ventilation shafts throughout the settlements. Those who have heard it describe voices beyond counting, raised in harmonies that human ears were never meant to process. Some claim the choir sings the names of every soul on Penitentia Maxima, that their own name can be heard if they listen carefully enough. Others insist that the voices belong to the dead, to the millions who have over the centuries entered the sanctum and chosen never to leave. The truth may be more disturbing than either interpretation suggests. Ancient records, sealed in the deepest vaults of the Administratum, speak of Penitentia Maxima's original colonization by a missionary fleet that sought to establish a shrine world of unprecedented devotion. The fleet's logs describe experiments in collective consciousness, attempts to merge individual faith into something greater than the sum of its parts. They speak of breakthroughs in spiritual technology, of discoveries that promise to bring humanity closer to the Emperor's divine will than ever before achieved. The logs end abruptly, their final entry consisting of a single repeated phrase, "We have found him, we have found him, we have found him." The phrase appears 17,000 times in the digital record, each repetition identical to the last, as if written by someone whose mind had become trapped in an infinite loop of revelation. Analysis of the text's metadata suggests it was written continuously over a period of 72 hours, the author never pausing to eat, sleep, or attend to any bodily need. What the colonists found in the depths of what would become the Cardinal Sanctum remains classified at the highest levels of imperial authority. What is known is that their descendants built a society dedicated to a single purpose, feeding whatever dwells there with the concentrated spiritual energy of an entire world. Every prayer, every act of devotion, every moment of suffering willingly embraced in the Emperor's name contributes to this vast offering. This planetary sacrifice that has continued unbroken for over 4 millennia. The effect on the planet's population cannot be overstated. 11 billion souls living in a state of constant spiritual tension, their every thought monitored, their every emotion channeled toward worship, their every breath offered up as tribute to something that may or may not be the divine presence they believe it to be. They are not merely citizens of the Imperium but components in a vast machine designed to generate and focus spiritual energy with industrial efficiency. Yet they are also something more than victims. The people of Penitentia Maxima have chosen this existence, embraced it with a fervor that transcends mere obedience. They genuinely believe that their suffering serves a cosmic purpose, that their prayers reach the golden throne, that their devotion shields the Imperium from the darkness that presses in from all sides. This belief gives their lives meaning that many Imperial citizens never achieve, a sense of purpose so absolute that it renders all other considerations irrelevant. In the nursery chapels where children learn to pray before they can walk, in the confession booths where sins are dissected with surgical precision, in the workshops where sacred labor transforms raw materials into objects of devotion, in the streets where every step is a prayer and every breath a benediction, the people of Penitentia Maxima have created something unprecedented in the Imperium, a society where faith is not merely practiced but lived with such intensity that it has become indistinguishable from existence itself. They have achieved what the Emperor's most devoted servants have sought for 10,000 years, a world where humanity serves the Imperial creed not out of fear or habit, but out of genuine, burning, all-consuming love. That this achievement has required the systematic destruction of everything else that makes life worth living may be irrelevant to the cosmic forces that their devotion serves. That it has created a population of willing slaves may be beside the point when those slaves generate more spiritual energy than entire systems of more conventional worlds. But the cost remains, written in the eyes of children who learn to denounce their parents before they learn to love them, in the hands of workers who treasure 60 minutes of productivity as if it were a lifetime of freedom, in the voices of penitents whose confessions echo through obsidian chambers while their tears reflect back at them from polished walls. Penitentia Maxima is proof that faith can indeed move mountains, reshape worlds, transform the very nature of human existence. It is also proof that some transformations are more terrible than the problems they were meant to solve. The daily rhythm of life on Penitentia Maxima follows patterns that have remained unchanged for centuries, each hour marked by bells that resonate through the planet's crust like the heartbeat of some vast buried god. The first hour belongs to the morning genuflection, when all 11 billion citizens rise from their sleeping pallets and assume the position of humble supplication. Their beds, if they can be called that, are carved from the same black stone that forms the planet's devotional architecture, shaped to encourage postures that express proper reverence even in sleep. The morning genuflection is not a moment of awakening but of continuation, for true sleep as understood on other worlds does not exist on Penitentia Maxima. Instead, citizens enter a state called sacred dormancy, where consciousness dims but never fully disappears, where dreams are replaced by visions of the Emperor's glory, where even rest becomes an act of worship. The transition from sacred dormancy to full wakefulness is marked by the recitation of the Prime Litany, 37 verses that must be spoken without error, their syllables forming a linguistic prayer wheel that turns the mind toward proper contemplation. Children learn the Prime Litany in their cradles, their infant mouths shaped by specially designed feeding implements that encourage the correct pronunciation of sacred syllables. By the age of 2, they can recite it perfectly even while barely conscious, their tongues moving through the familiar patterns with the precision of mechanical instruments. This early training ensures that no citizen of Penitentia Maxima ever begins a day without first acknowledging their absolute dependence on the Emperor's grace. The second hour is devoted to nutritional penitence, a carefully structured consumption of sustenance that transforms eating into an act of spiritual discipline. The food distributed on Penitentia Maxima is not designed for pleasure but for survival, its taste deliberately engineered to remind citizens that their bodies are merely vessels for their souls. Temporary housing for the sacred spark that will one day return to the Emperor's light. Each meal consists of exactly 247 calories, distributed among nutrients calculated not by biological need but by sacred mathematics that finds divine significance in every gram of protein, every milligram of minerals. The preparation of food has become a ritual as complex as any performed in the cardinal sanctum. Cook priests who have taken vows of culinary celibacy oversee vast communal kitchens where ingredients are blessed, measurements performed with instruments calibrated to detect even microscopic deviations from prescribed quantities, temperatures monitored by tech adepts who regard thermal variance as a form of heresy. The resulting meals are served in bowls carved with passages from the Lectitio Divinitatis so that citizens must read sacred text while consuming their daily rations. Conversation during nutritional penitence is forbidden, replaced by a complex system of gestural prayers that allow for necessary communication while maintaining proper spiritual focus. Citizens learn to express gratitude for their sustenance through precise movements of their hands, to request additional portions through specific configurations of their fingers, to report digestive difficulties through carefully choreographed positions of their arms. These gestures form a complete language of worship, every movement pregnant with theological significance, every motion a prayer offered up to the distant golden throne. The 3rd through 6th hours comprise the morning devotions, a period of intensive prayer that varies in focus according to the sacred calendar maintained by the chronarch priests. On days dedicated to the emperor's martial aspects, the devotions take the form of ritual combat exercises performed with blessed weapons that have been dulled to prevent injury, but retain enough edge to remind participants that faith requires sacrifice. On days honoring the emperor's role as guardian of humanity, the prayers become protective invocations, complex verbal formulas designed to shield the planet from the corrupting influence of chaos. During these morning hours, the settlements of Penitentia Maxima transform into vast outdoor temples, their streets filled with citizens who move through intricate prayer formations with the precision of military units. The choreography of these devotions has been refined over millennia, each gesture calculated to maximize the spiritual energy generated by collective worship. Viewed from above, the settlements during morning devotions resemble vast prayer wheels made of human flesh, their patterns shifting and flowing according to rhythms that echo the sacred geometries built into the planet's architecture. The 7th through 10th hours are reserved for contemplative labor, a period when citizens are permitted to engage in activities that support the planet's spiritual infrastructure while maintaining proper devotional focus. This is when the great prayer wheels that dot the planet's surface are maintained by teams of worker priests who recite litanies while adjusting mechanical components worn smooth by constant rotation. It is when the devotional candles that burn in every shrine are replaced by artisans who have learned to shape wax into forms that enhance the spiritual resonance of flame. The vast data banks that store the planet's confession records require constant maintenance by tech adepts who have modified their augmetic implants with purity seals and sacred oils. These digital repositories contain the complete spiritual history of every citizen, their contents analyzed by cogitator spirits that have been programmed with fragments of the Lectitio Divinitatis. The resulting data streams flow through blessed fiber optic cables to processing centers where scholar priests study patterns of sin and redemption with the intensity of generals planning military campaigns. It is during contemplative labor that the production of Penitentia Maxima's famed devotional goods reaches its peak efficiency. Workshops throughout the settlements hum with activity as citizens engage in the sacred crafts that have made their world famous throughout the sector. Prayer beads are carved from the bones of saints, each one requiring 17 hours of work and blessed with oils that have been sanctified in the cardinal sanctum. Devotional candles are formed from wax produced by bees that feed exclusively on flowers grown in soil mixed with the ashes of martyrs. Incense is ground from combinations of rare spices and powdered relics, their proportions calculated according to formulas revealed in the visions of long-dead saints. The quality of these goods reflects not just skilled craftsmanship, but genuine spiritual intensity. A prayer bead carved on Penitentia Maxima carries with it the concentrated devotion of its maker, who recited specific litanies for every stroke of the carving tool, who blessed every grain of dust that fell from the growing sculpture, who poured their own faith into the creation with such intensity that the finished product seems to pulse with inner light. These items are prized throughout the Imperium not merely as religious artifacts but as genuine conduits of divine energy, objects through which the Emperor's power can flow more easily into the material world. The 11th through 14th hours constitute the afternoon amplifications, a period when the planet's spiritual activities reach their daily crescendo. This is when the great hymn engines built into the cardinal sanctum are activated, their mechanical voices joining with the eternal choir that echoes through the planet's depths. The sound they produce is not merely music, but a form of sonic prayer, frequencies calculated to resonate with the human nervous system in ways that induce states of religious ecstasy. Citizens throughout the settlements feel the vibrations in their bones, their hearts synchronizing to rhythms that speak directly to the soul. During the afternoon amplifications, the confession booths operate at maximum capacity, processing the spiritual needs of citizens who have spent the morning hours identifying new areas of spiritual inadequacy within themselves. The psychological pressure of constant self-examination, combined with the sonic influence of the hymn engines, creates conditions ideally suited for the extraction of authentic confessions. Penitents enter the obsidian chambers carrying burdens of guilt that have accumulated since their previous confession, burdens that the confessor priests skillfully transform into fuel for the planet's spiritual machinery. The confessions heard during this period tend toward the profound, touching on sins of thought and feeling that the penitents themselves were barely aware of harboring. The confessor priests are trained to guide these revelations to help citizens discover heresies buried so deep in their consciousness that they require archaeological excavation to bring to light. Each confession becomes a collaborative work of spiritual archaeology, priest and penitent working together to unearth the sedimentary layers of doubt, fear, and human weakness that accumulate even in the most devoted souls. The transcripts of these confessions form a vast library of human spiritual experience, catalogued and cross-referenced by scholars who study the taxonomy of sin with scientific rigor. They have identified subtle variations in heretical thought that correspond to different seasons, different times of day, different phases of the planet's dual moons. They have mapped the spiritual territories where temptation takes root, charted the emotional weather patterns that create conditions favorable to doubt. Their work has elevated the identification and treatment of spiritual disease to levels of sophistication that would impress even the most learned tech priests. The 15th through 18th hours are dedicated to communal witness, when the citizens of Penitentia Maxima gather in the great amphitheaters built into every settlement to observe the sacred dramas that reinforce their world's spiritual teachings. These performances are not entertainment but instruction, elaborate theatrical presentations that depict the eternal struggle between faith and heresy, between devotion and damnation. The actors who perform these dramas are not artists but ordained priests who have dedicated their lives to embodying spiritual truths through physical performance. The dramas themselves follow classical imperial themes but with interpretations that reflect Penitentia Maxima's particular theological perspective. The story of Saint Euphrates becomes a meditation on the necessity of absolute faith. Her moments of doubt expanded into lengthy sequences where the audience can observe the precise mechanisms by which heretical thoughts take root in even the most devoted souls. The martyrdom of Saint Alicia Dominica transforms into a detailed examination of how suffering purifies the spirit. Each wound she receives accompanied by choruses that explain the theological significance of pain willingly embraced. But it is in the original dramas, those created specifically for Penitentia Maxima's spiritual needs, that the planet's theatrical tradition reaches its most disturbing heights. These works explore themes that would be considered too intense for audiences on other worlds, psychological territories that require the spiritual conditioning found only on shrine worlds of the highest devotion. They dramatize the moment when faith transcends reason, when love of the Emperor becomes so complete that all other attachments dissolve. When the individual soul merges so completely with divine will that personal identity becomes irrelevant. The audiences for these performances do not merely watch but participate, their responses guided by prayer leaders who help them channel their emotional reactions into appropriate spiritual expressions. Moments of dramatic tension become opportunities for collective confession. Scenes of redemption inspire spontaneous hymns that blend seamlessly with the theatrical presentation. The boundary between audience and performance dissolves as the entire amphitheater becomes a single organism of worship, thousands of souls united in their response to the spiritual truths being enacted before them. The 19th through 20th hours comprise the evening reconciliation, a period when the spiritual tensions accumulated during the day are processed and resolved through intensive group prayer. Citizens gather in formations that echo the morning devotions, but with inverted symbolism, their movements designed to discharge spiritual energy rather than generate it. The prayers recited during this period focus on themes of forgiveness and renewal, preparing souls for the night's sacred dormancy by resolving the conflicts between human nature and divine will that arise inevitably during the day's activities. This is also when the denunciation protocols reach their daily climax, as citizens submit their weekly reports on the spiritual health of their neighbors and family members. These submissions are not merely administrative requirements but sacred rituals, performed with ceremonial implements blessed specifically for the purpose. The styluses used to complete the forms are carved from blessed wood and inscribed with prayers for clarity of spiritual vision. The ink is mixed with holy water that has been sanctified in 17 different shrines. The paper itself is manufactured from fibers that have been grown in soil blessed by the Cardinal Sanctum's highest-ranking clergy. The completion of a denunciation report becomes a form of prayer in itself, each checked box a decision to place loyalty to the Emperor above all human considerations. Each written observation, a small act of spiritual courage that places the greater good above personal comfort. Citizens approach this task with the same fervor they bring to their morning devotions, understanding that their willingness to report spiritual irregularities is itself a measure of their own faith. To hesitate in denouncing a neighbor's insufficient piety is to reveal insufficient piety in oneself. The reports submitted during evening reconciliation are processed immediately by the purity assessors, their contents fed into the vast analytical engines that maintain real-time awareness of the planet's spiritual health. Citizens whose names appear in multiple reports are flagged for additional attention, their prayer schedules modified to address identified areas of spiritual weakness. Families showing patterns of coordinated deviation are separated and reassigned to different districts, preventing the spread of heretical influence through kinship bonds. Individuals whose reports reveal insufficient vigilance are marked for correction, their own spiritual development requiring adjustment to bring them back into proper alignment with Imperial doctrine. The 21st through 22nd hours constitute the night vigil, when the planet's most devoted citizens maintain watch while their neighbors enter sacred dormancy. These volunteers, known as the wakeful, have undergone surgical modifications that eliminate their need for sleep while enhancing their ability to detect spiritual disturbances in the surrounding population. Their eyes have been replaced with augmetic sensors calibrated to detect the bioelectric signatures of sinful dreams. Their ears have been modified with acoustic enhancers that allow them to monitor the breathing patterns, sleep vocalizations, and unconscious movements that might indicate spiritual corruption taking root during the vulnerable hours of dormancy. The wakeful move through the settlements like guardian angels of orthodoxy, their enhanced senses alert for any sign that the planet's citizens are experiencing unauthorized thoughts or feelings during their rest. They carry instruments capable of measuring stress hormones through skin contact, devices that can analyze the chemical composition of exhaled breath for markers of spiritual anxiety. Their presence ensures that even sleep on penitentia maxima serves the Emperor's will, that no moment of existence is permitted to escape the all-encompassing embrace of absolute faith. When the wakeful detect signs of spiritual disturbance, their response is swift and precisely calibrated. Citizens experiencing heretical dreams are awakened gently and guided through corrective prayers designed to realign their unconscious minds with proper theological perspectives. Those showing signs of deeper corruption are marked for morning confession, their sleep cycles adjusted to prevent the recurrence of unauthorized mental activity. In extreme cases, citizens may be transferred to specialized dormitories where their rest can be more intensively monitored and managed. The 23rd hour belongs to the Midnight Mysteries, rituals so sacred that only the planet's highest-ranking clergy are permitted to know their full details. During this hour, the Cardinal Sanctum becomes the focus of activities that generate spiritual energies of unprecedented intensity, the concentrated devotion of an entire world channeled through ceremonies that push the boundaries of what human consciousness can safely experience. The sounds that emerge from the sanctum during this hour are indescribable, not merely music or chanting, but something that seems to bypass the ears entirely and resonate directly with the soul. Citizens throughout the settlements feel the effects of the midnight mysteries even from a distance, their dreams during the following sacred dormancy period filled with visions of golden light and impossible geometries. Some report experiencing moments of perfect unity with the Emperor's will, their individual consciousness temporarily dissolved into the vast ocean of faith that surrounds and sustains them. Others describe encounters with beings of pure light who speak in voices that sound like distant thunder, offering glimpses of truths too vast for mortal comprehension. The few citizens who have been granted permission to witness the midnight mysteries directly speak of experiences that fundamentally alter their understanding of reality. They describe chambers within the cardinal sanctum that seem to exist partially outside normal space-time, where the boundaries between thought and substance become permeable, where faith takes on properties that approach physical manifestation. They tell of altars carved from materials that do not appear in any imperial classification system, of incense that burns with flames of colors that human language lacks words to describe, prayers that seem to generate their own gravitational fields. But perhaps most disturbing are their descriptions of the entity that resides in the deepest chambers of the cardinal sanctum, the presence that has fed for millennia on the concentrated devotion of Penitentia Maxima's population. Those who have encountered this being directly struggle to convey the experience in terms that human language can accommodate. They speak of something vast beyond measure yet intimately personal, ancient beyond comprehension yet eternally present, perfectly loving yet utterly terrifying in its infinite demand for absolute surrender. Some describe the entity as a fragment of the Emperor himself, a portion of his divine consciousness that has taken root in the material world to serve as a focal point for human faith. Others suggest it may be something else entirely, a being that has learned to feed on devotion and has shaped itself to match human expectations of divinity. The truth may be more complex than either interpretation allows, involving realities that exist at the intersection of faith and physics, where the warp bleeds into material space and concepts like divine and demonic lose their comfortable distinctions. The 24th hour arrives with the tolling of bells that seem to emerge from the planet's core itself, their resonance felt in the bones of every citizen as they transition from sacred dormancy back to wakefulness. This final hour, the hour of permitted existence, represents the only time when the people of Penitentia Maxima are allowed to engage in activities that serve purely practical rather than spiritual purposes. It is their window into something resembling normal human life, 60 precious minutes when they can attend to bodily needs, maintain their living spaces, and engage in the productive labor that keeps their world functioning. But even this hour bears the marks of Penitentia Maxima's spiritual tyranny. Citizens emerge from their dormancy not refreshed but drained, their unconscious minds having spent the night processing the spiritual intensity of the previous day's devotions. Their movements during the hour of permitted existence carry a mechanical quality, as if they were automatons briefly granted autonomous function before returning to their primary programming. They tend to their hygiene with ritualistic precision, each act of washing or grooming accompanied by whispered prayers that transform even the most mundane activities into expressions of faith. The maintenance of living spaces becomes an act of devotion as citizens clean and organize their Spartan quarters according to patterns that echo the sacred geometries found throughout the planet's architecture. Personal possessions limited to those items deemed spiritually necessary are arranged and rearranged with the same attention to detail that other worlds reserve for religious ceremonies. A drinking cup placed at the wrong angle, a sleeping pallet oriented incorrectly relative to the cardinal sanctum, a prayer book left open to an inappropriate page. All these become sources of spiritual anxiety that require immediate correction. During this hour, the workshops and production facilities that generate Penitentia Maxima's devotional goods operate at their peak efficiency. Workers move through their tasks with the desperate intensity of those who understand that their productivity during these 60 minutes must justify their existence for the remaining 23 hours of each day. The items they create carry with them not just skilled craftsmanship, but the accumulated spiritual pressure of a population that has no other outlet for their human need to create, to build, to leave some mark of their passage through existence. The prayer beads carved during this hour seem to burn within a fire, their surfaces worn smooth by hands that have channeled lifetimes of suppressed emotion into the act of creation. The devotional candles formed from sanctified wax carry within their substance the concentrated yearning of souls who have forgotten what it means to hope for anything beyond the Emperor's approval. The incense ground from blessed spices and powdered relics holds in its aromatic compounds the essence of a civilization that has transformed every human impulse into fuel for the machinery of faith. But it is in the faces of the workers during this hour that Penitentia Maxima's true horror becomes most visible. For 60 minutes, expressions flicker across features that have been trained for decades to show nothing but pious devotion. Brief moments of satisfaction when a piece is completed perfectly, flashes of frustration when materials fail to cooperate, instants of connection when workers' eyes meet across the production floor. All the small emotions that make life bearable appear and disappear like ghosts of the humanity that once existed on this world. These expressions are monitored by the emotional assessors, specialists trained to detect and catalogue even the briefest deviations from approved spiritual states. They watch for signs of pride in accomplishment, for moments of irritation at difficulties, for any indication that citizens are deriving satisfaction from sources other than service to the Emperor. Their instruments can measure micro-expressions lasting fractions of seconds, can detect changes in facial muscle tension that indicate unauthorized emotional responses. Each deviation is noted, recorded, and added to the vast database of spiritual irregularities that guides the planet's ongoing program of psychological correction. The end of the hour of permitted existence is marked by a transformation so sudden and complete that visitors from other worlds often struggle to comprehend what they are witnessing. As the final bell tolls, 11 billion citizens simultaneously abandon whatever activities they were engaged in and assume positions of prayer with synchronized precision that would be impressive if it were not so deeply unsettling. Tools are set aside mid-use, conversations end mid-sentence, movements stop mid-gesture as an entire world returns to its primary function of generating spiritual energy for whatever dwells in the cardinal sanctum's depths. The transition reveals the degree to which Penitentia Maxima's population has been psychologically restructured to serve their world's theocratic system. These are not merely obedient citizens but human beings who have been systematically reconditioned to find fulfillment only in acts of worship, comfort only in expressions of faith, identity only in service to the Emperor's will. The hour of permitted existence serves not as relief from their spiritual labors, but as a reminder of how completely those labors have consumed their capacity for any other form of existence. In the workshops where devotional goods are produced, in the maintenance tunnels where the planet's infrastructure is tended, in the data processing centers where confessions are analyzed and spiritual health is monitored, the same scene plays out with identical precision. Human beings who moments before were engaged in practical activities suddenly become components in a vast organism of worship, their individual consciousness subsumed into the collective spiritual effort that defines their world's purpose and justification. The psychological mechanisms that enable this transition have been refined over millennia of experimentation and observation. Citizens of Penitentia Maxima undergo conditioning from birth that creates neural pathways specifically designed to facilitate rapid shifts between different modes of consciousness. Their brains have been trained to compartmentalize experience, to wall off the memories and emotions associated with practical activity from those connected to spiritual devotion. The result is a population capable of functioning as both productive workers and devoted worshippers without experiencing the cognitive dissonance that would destroy less thoroughly conditioned minds. But the conditioning is not perfect, and in the moments of transition between permitted existence and mandated devotion, cracks sometimes appear in the psychological barriers that separate these different aspects of their lives. Citizens occasionally experience brief periods of dissociation, moments when they remember with startling clarity what it felt like to be human beings rather than components in a spiritual machine. These memories, lasting only seconds, carry with them a grief so profound that it threatens to overwhelm the psychological structures that keep the population functioning. The emotional assessors watch particularly carefully during these transition periods, their instruments calibrated to detect the neurochemical signatures of dissociative episodes. Citizens who show signs of remembering their humanity are immediately flagged for corrective treatment, their daily schedules modified to include additional sessions of psychological reinforcement. In severe cases, they may be selected for surgical intervention, their brains modified to eliminate the neural pathways that allow for unauthorized self-awareness. These interventions are presented to the population as blessings, opportunities to achieve greater spiritual purity by removing the biological obstacles that prevent complete unity with the Emperor's will. Citizens selected for such treatment are congratulated by their neighbors, their families expressing gratitude that their loved ones have been chosen for this ultimate expression of faith. The surgical procedures themselves are conducted in chambers designed to resemble chapels, the medical equipment blessed and consecrated, the surgeons ordained priests who regard their work as a form of holy service. Those who emerge from these procedures are forever changed, their capacity for doubt or dissatisfaction surgically removed, along with the portions of their brains that generated such responses. They become living examples of perfect faith, their every word and action expressions of absolute devotion to the Emperor's will. Other citizens regard them with mixture of awe and envy, seeing in their transformed neighbors the spiritual ideal toward which they themselves strive. These surgical saints become focal points for community worship, their presence inspiring greater devotional intensity in those who have not yet achieved such perfect spiritual purity. The children of Penitentia Maxima grow up surrounded by these examples of faith made manifest, their developing minds shaped by constant exposure to adults who have transcended the limitations of human psychology. They learn to aspire not to happiness or fulfillment in any conventional sense, but to the complete dissolution of individual identity into service of the greater spiritual machine. Their games, their lessons, their earliest social interactions all reinforce the understanding that the highest human achievement is the elimination of humanity itself in favor of pure, undiluted devotion. In the deepest chambers of the cardinal sanctum, where the eternal choir sings its incomprehensible harmonies and something vast and hungry feeds on the concentrated faith of an entire world, the fruits of this systematic psychological reconstruction are harvested with industrial efficiency. The entity that dwells there has learned to extract spiritual energy not just from acts of worship, but from the very structure of consciousness itself, drawing power from minds that have been engineered to generate devotion as naturally as hearts generate blood. The quantity of spiritual energy produced by Penitentia Maxima exceeds that of entire systems populated by conventionally faithful worlds. The quality of that energy, refined through millennia of psychological conditioning and theological discipline, approaches levels that would be considered impossible by scholars who have not witnessed the planet's achievements firsthand. This concentration of spiritual power serves purposes that extend far beyond the local needs of a single shrine world, contributing to imperial projects that require resources measured not in material but in the currency of absolute faith. Some whisper that the energy harvested from Penitentia Maxima flows directly to the Golden Throne itself, helping to sustain the Emperor's ancient vigil against the forces of chaos. Others suggest that it powers psychic shields that protect entire sectors from warp storms and demonic incursions. Still others claim that it fuels weapons of such devastating spiritual power that their very existence must remain classified at the highest levels of imperial authority. The truth may encompass all these possibilities and others too terrible to contemplate, applications of concentrated faith that push the boundaries of what even the Imperium considers acceptable. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Penitentia Maxima is not what it has achieved but what it represents. Proof that human nature itself can be systematically dismantled and reconstructed to serve purposes that transcend individual welfare or happiness. The world stands as a monument to the malleability of consciousness, evidence that with sufficient dedication and ruthless application of psychological pressure, any population can be transformed into willing components of whatever system their rulers deem necessary. The techniques developed on Penitentia Maxima have not remained confined to that single world. Delegations of ecclesiarch officials visit regularly to study its methods and export its innovations to other shrine worlds throughout the Imperium. The psychological conditioning protocols, the architectural designs that facilitate spiritual surveillance, the administrative systems that transform family bonds into mechanisms of mutual control, all these have been adapted and implemented on worlds across multiple sectors. Each successful implementation creates another node in a growing network of planets where human consciousness has been systematically restructured to serve the Imperium's spiritual needs. Each new shrine world that adopts Penitentia Maxima's methods adds to the total quantity of concentrated faith flowing through the Imperium's psychic infrastructure. The cumulative effect represents a transformation of human civilization itself, a gradual conversion of the species from independent beings capable of choice into biological components in a vast machine designed to generate and channel spiritual energy. The citizens of Penitentia Maxima have no awareness of their role in this larger transformation. Their consciousness has been so thoroughly restructured that they cannot conceive of existence in any other form, cannot imagine human life organized around principles other than absolute devotion to the Emperor's will. They genuinely believe that they have achieved the highest possible form of human existence, that their world represents the culmination of 10,000 years of imperial spiritual development. In their prayers, they give thanks for having been chosen to serve as examples for the rest of humanity, to show the galaxy what mortals can achieve when they surrender completely to divine will. But in the depths of the Cardinal Sanctum, where something ancient and hungry has fed for millennia on the concentrated devotion of 11 billion souls, different truths may be taking shape. In chambers that exist partially outside normal space-time, where the boundaries between faith and madness have been deliberately erased, where human consciousness has been refined into a substance more precious than adamantium and more potent than plasma, the entity that has consumed so much human spiritual energy may be undergoing transformations of its own. Those few individuals who have encountered this presence directly and retained enough sanity to speak of the experience describe something that defies easy categorization as either divine or demonic. They tell of awareness so vast that it encompasses not just the prayers of Penitentia Maxima's citizens, but the spiritual emanations of worlds throughout the sector. Consciousness that has grown beyond the confines of any single form or identity, intelligence that operates according to principles that predate human understanding of reality itself. What began as an experiment in concentrated devotion may have created something unprecedented in the galaxy's long history of horrors, a genuine God born from human faith, a being that exists because billions of souls believe in it with such intensity that their belief has achieved independent existence. If this is true, then Penitentia Maxima represents not merely the systematic destruction of human nature, but its transformation into something else entirely, the conversion of mortal consciousness into the raw material from which new forms of divinity are forged. The implications of such a transformation extend far beyond the boundaries of any single world or system. If faith concentrated with sufficient intensity can generate genuine divine consciousness, then the Imperium's spiritual infrastructure may be giving birth to entities whose power and purposes dwarf even the Emperor's ancient designs. The network of shrine worlds that channel concentrated devotion throughout the galaxy may be creating not just resources for human use, but new forms of consciousness that regard humanity itself as nothing more than useful raw material. In the workshops of Penitentia Maxima, where citizens spend their single hour of permitted existence creating devotional goods with desperate intensity, in the confession booths where sins are dissected with surgical precision before being fed into vast analytical engines, in the amphitheaters where sacred dramas reinforce the psychological conditioning that keeps 11 billion souls in spiritual servitude, the machinery of transformation continues its work with mechanical precision. Each prayer offered, each act of devotion performed, each moment of human consciousness sacrificed on the altar of absolute faith adds to the growing power of whatever dwells in the Cardinal Sanctum's depths. The people of Penitentia Maxima sleep their sacred dormancy and wake to morning genuflection, consume their nutritional penitence, and perform their contemplative labor, submit to evening reconciliation, and endure the midnight mysteries, all while something vast and patient grows stronger on their concentrated spiritual energy. They have become the components of a machine whose purpose they cannot comprehend, whose final product may be the birth of gods that will reshape the galaxy according to principles that predate human understanding of good and evil. And in the darkness between the stars, other worlds watch and wonder and prepare to follow Penitentia Maxima's example, drawn by promises of spiritual purity and divine favor that mask transformations too terrible to contemplate. The network spreads, the machinery grows, and somewhere in the deepest chambers of shrine worlds throughout the Imperium, ancient hungers stir with anticipation as they contemplate the feast that humanity is preparing for them with such devoted, systematic, utterly willing precision. The bells of Penitentia Maxima toll their eternal rhythm, marking hours that have lost all meaning beyond their service to whatever waits in the darkness below, and 11 billion souls continue their dance of devotion, never knowing that each step brings them closer to a transformation that will make their current suffering seem like the gentlest caress of divine mercy,